Benjamin Netanyahu has fired the defense minister, Yoav Gallant. And I want you to understand, Yoav Gallant is a war hero in Israel. He has participated in virtually every operation, major and minor, covert and overt, since 1977 when he joined the military. He has been in the special operations side of things for most of his career. He's a general in the IDF until he was appointed as the Minister of Defense. This guy has been there and done that. He has not been known as a fainting flower or a weak link in the IDF ever in his career. This is no coward, okay? But as it turns out, it sounds like he had some very different views on what they should do, or what the military should do in terms of trying to prosecute this war. And the divide between him and Benjamin Netanyahu just got too wide. It's just got too much. And so Benjamin Netanyahu gave a long speech. The prime minister said, quote, because he and the cabinet had lost faith in the defense minister, and because it appears the defense minister lost the position of the public and was making decisions in line with our enemies. Not only am I, Netanyahu, saying this, but the whole cabinet was saying this, and we could not continue in this fashion. Now, that's a pretty strong statement to say that our defense minister, who is a war hero in Israel, who has commanded troops all the way up and down the line, has lost his edge to the point that he's making decisions in line with the enemy. He's making it easier for Hamas to hold on. That is strong language. And you can bet that cut Yoav Gallant deeply. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu assigned Israel Katz, who was formerly the foreign minister, as the new defense minister, and he will take his position within 48 hours. Part of the divide between Netanyahu and Gallant came down to what they should do about the hostages. Gallant has been pushing for a ceasefire, an agreement with Hamas to get back any of the hostages that they can get back. I think it's hard to understand this from my point of view. This guy has been known to be a pretty hard charger his entire career. And now here he is saying, let's make some concessions to the enemy in order to get back some of our hostages, probably because he understands that the likelihood of getting any of their hostages back alive is somewhere between slim and none. And he felt like they ought to do anything they needed to do to give those remaining hostages a chance. That's tough. There are two groups of people in Israel who are very much against one another in terms of what they believe should be done with this war. There are the families of those people being held hostage and the families of those soldiers who have lost their lives. There's some crossover, but for the most part, the families of the hostages are saying, make whatever concessions we have to make, surrender to Hamas if we have to, in order to get any of our people back. And the families of those soldiers who have died in combat are saying, if you do that, then you make my son's sacrifice null and void. We have to continue pushing until we win. Every concession we make to Hamas now means more hostages will be taken in the future, because we will be rewarding Hamas for taking hostages. Anything we give them is just a reward to Hamas for taking hostages, and it means that more will be taken by Hamas or somebody else at some point in the future. Even if we have to push until there are no hostages left alive in order to win against Hamas, that's a terrible outcome, but it's the outcome that we must choose in order to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We need to make it clear to our enemies that we are willing to go to the mat to destroy them, even if it means the death of our own people, so that we can ensure that they get the message that we will never allow this to happen again. That is a tough decision. There was a new proposal that was put on the table by the United States and Egypt. That proposal was a hostage deal floated to Hamas via Egypt. Hamas was not at the table. And they said, how about a 10-day ceasefire in exchange for 10 hostages and 100 hostages on the side of the Palestinians. And Hamas just rejected it out of hand, said, no way, not going to happen. This is what we're dealing with. I mean, what's the point of trying to negotiate with people that aren't even willing to take a deal that's that one-sided, right? Now, it also probably tells us that it's certainly possible that Hamas cannot come up with 10 hostages. They can't find them. They don't even know if there are 10 left alive. I think that as time goes on and they keep slicing and dicing the population inside Gaza more and more, it's going to get more and more like this. They're going to have harder and harder time finding or at least getting to any of the hostages to see if they're still alive. Yeah, Joshua, you're right. It's 100 prisoners, not hostages. I misspoke. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken said to his Egyptian counterpart, quote, Hamas once again refused to release even a small number of hostages in order to guarantee a ceasefire and relief for the residents of the Gaza Strip. This comes at the same time that the United States is still pressuring Israel to allow more aid into Gaza and saying that if they don't do that in the next 7 days, that the United States will cut off military aid to Israel until they open it up for more aid into Gaza. Now, I hear where they're coming from, but it's just not a good idea. The IDF has just completed opening up a new corridor in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. This corridor would essentially separate Gaza City from the northern part of Gaza. So essentially they're clearing out all the people from the border between Gaza and Israel in the north, all the way down to Gaza City. And that corridor, north of that, they've cleared everybody out. And they're basically not going to let them go back. They're creating a buffer zone for like a no man's land for the Israelis once this is all over. They've had to clear out about 60,000 Gazans. There are still about 1,000 people left that just refuse to leave. The IDF is not forcing them to leave, but there are no services up there. There's no garbage pickup, no water, no power, and very few buildings. Almost all the buildings have been flattened. So it's just got this huge open area now. And I guess there are still a few people saying they're going to keep camping up there. It is very likely that Iran will strike Israel in the next 24 hours. They know that they have moved rockets into place, missiles into place in at least 70 different sites across Israel, and they have arrays of missiles and rockets set up inside Syria and possibly inside Iraq. The United States sent a message to Iraq today and told them, if you allow Iran to strike Israel from your territory, we won't be able to stop Israel from striking back at Iraq. So if you want things blown up in your country, just go ahead and let these Iranian-backed militias do their thing. Otherwise, you better put a stop to it, right? So it's almost a foregone conclusion that there will be Israeli retaliation strikes inside Syria if those missiles are fired at Israel. Very likely that they will be. So what you're looking at is potentially a strike up to twice as many munitions being fired at Israel as the last time on October 1st. And so here we are, November 5th, just over a month later, and we may see up to 400 munitions this time being fired at Israel. Could that overwhelm Israel's capabilities to shoot them down? Yes, it could. But the United States has added quite a bit of capacity inside Israel to assist the Israelis at shooting down those munitions with the 2 THAAD missile batteries that we've brought in. They've got a large number of U.S. aircraft in the region that could fly and respond if these attacks take place. So I think that may counterbalance any additional capacity that Iran is bringing online. Also, as I mentioned in last night's live, the United States is bringing in up to a dozen B-52 heavy bombers into the region. The B-52 heavy bombers are not defensive in nature. There's no defensive role for them. They won't be flying around taking down Iranian munitions being fired at Israel. They don't have the capacity to do that. What they would have the capacity to do is strike very, very hard at Iranian targets, perhaps. More likely, targets in Iraq and in Syria would be struck by those B-52s. They also have used those in the past on Houthi targets, and so they could use them again on the Houthis if the Houthis decide to get skippy during this attack. Keep in mind, those B-52s carry more ordnance than some countries have on them, more destructive capacity than some entire militaries. That when you have 12 of them in the country, plus they've added more destroyers and more aircraft in addition to the B-52s, and more refueling capacity, which is key because that refueling capacity could assist Israel in striking at Iran. Suffice it to say, I think it's going to be an exciting rest of our week in the Middle East, and we're going to have a lot to talk about here on the Hot Zone. There will be violence, most likely, after the election is over, and you want to be prepared for that. You can get prepared for that by going to chuckholton.com and getting that book, Death of Civilization. Now, to the people who are emailing me who don't understand what a download is, this is a digital file that you are going to take from the internet and put on your computer by clicking a link. That's called downloading. I've had several people who have said, can you mail me the download to my mailing address and then give me their home address? And look, that's not how downloads work. They're digital files that you can only read on your computer or your phone in a PDF format or an EPUB format that you could put into a Kindle and read. If you'd like the EPUB format, send Amy an email at her email address is amy@holtonnews.com.